In 1908, a book appeared quietly, almost whispering its way into the margins of Western thought. It was titled The KYBALION, and it claimed no famous author, no institutional backing, no academic seal. Just three anonymous figures, the three initiates standing like silent guardians of forgotten truths. At the heart of this book lay a bold assertion that the universe is governed not by chaos or blind chance, but by timeless laws that ancient civilizations once knew and lived by. These are not vague metaphors or poetic speculations. They are principles 7, to be precise, condensed from the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, a legendary figure who represents the convergence of Egyptian, Greek, and early philosophical traditions. To dismiss this as mystical fluff would be easy, but the deeper you look, the more you realize. These ideas mirror the latest insights of modern science, especially in fields like quantum physics, neuroscience, and systems theory. Let's begin with what the KYBALION calls the principle of mentalism. It states, all is mind. At first glance, that may sound abstract or even mystical, but today, leading physicists such as John Wheeler and Max Planck have pointed toward a startling conclusion. Consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, it may in fact be the foundation of all physical reality. Planck, the father of quantum theory, once said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. This echoes precisely what the ancients taught, that the universe arises not from particles bumping in the void, but from an intelligent, unified mind, what the KYBALION calls the all. Think of the way your dreams feel real while you sleep. Mountains rise, rivers flow, people move about, yet all of it exists within your mind. What if this waking world, too, was a dream not of your mind, but of a far vaster consciousness in which we all live, move, and have our being? This might sound speculative until we recall the double-slit experiment, a cornerstone of quantum mechanics. In this experiment, particles behave differently depending on whether they are observed. This isn't science fiction, it's standard physics. Somehow, the act of observation of consciousness itself influences matter. This doesn't mean we can magically change the world by mere thought. But it does mean there is a relationship between mind and matter that modern science has only begun to grasp, one that ancient wisdom sought to master. The practical question becomes, if reality reflects our inner state, how do we begin to shape it with intention rather than fear? Start here. Each morning, before touching your phone or turning on the TV, take 5 deep breaths and set a clear intention for your day. Not just vague hopes like, I want to feel good, but focused direction like, today I will act with courage, or today I will listen before I speak. Neuroscience confirms that this act of intention setting rewires your brain through a process called neuroplasticity. The frontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and higher reasoning, lights up and begins to form new neural pathways. Over time, repeated intention becomes habit, and habit becomes character. This is where ancient Hermeticism meets modern science, not in theory, but in practice. Consider also the power of visualization. MRI studies have shown that when a person merely imagines performing a physical task, say, playing the piano or walking through a forest, the same regions of the brain activate as if they were actually doing it. The mind cannot fully distinguish between inner image and outer experience. This aligns with what the KYBALION suggests, that we are mental creators, shaping our reality not only by our actions, but by the quality of our thoughts and the images we allow to take root. I speak now to those of you in the later chapters of life. You have seen decades of change, joy, loss, and wisdom hard-won. This stage is not an ending, but a vantage point. You are uniquely positioned to master what others still chase: perspective. You've witnessed how the world outside changes, sometimes beyond your control. But within, there remains a space no one can touch. There, in the quiet hours of morning or the deep stillness of night, you can return to what the ancients called the source, the mind behind all things. And from there, begin again, not to relive the past, but to shape each remaining moment with clarity, peace, and quiet power. Let this be your experiment. For 1 week, observe your thoughts as you would observe the stars, patiently, without judgment. Ask yourself each evening, what did I create today with my mind? What mood, what tone, what vibration did I send into the world? You don't need to understand every Hermetic law or quantum theory. You need only to begin paying attention. As the principle of correspondence says, as above, so below. What you nurture within, you will begin to see reflected without. And that, perhaps, is the most practical form of wisdom there is. Imagine walking through an ancient library, the air thick with the scent of parchment and candle wax. On the shelves are scrolls filled with cryptic diagrams, strange symbols, and poetic verses that seem to whisper truths beyond the reach of ordinary language. This is the world in which Hermetic knowledge was preserved not through academic lectures or open discourse, but through symbols and allegory, encoded to survive the fires of persecution and the blindness of dogma. For centuries, the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus were hidden in plain sight, woven into the architecture of temples, the illustrations of alchemical texts, and the metaphors of sacred rituals. Why such secrecy? Because truth, especially spiritual truth, has rarely been welcomed by power. In many periods of history, to think independently, to suggest that the divine lives within rather than only above, was to risk exile or death. So the ancients developed a language of veils, a system of inner meaning wrapped in story, image, and code. And yet, the human drive for understanding is relentless. We are meaning makers. Even in the 21st century, we find ourselves drawn to these ancient texts, not out of nostalgia, but because something within us recognizes their resonance. Carl Jung called this the collective unconscious, a deep reservoir of shared symbols and archetypes that live inside us all. When we encounter an alchemical image or a Hermetic aphorism, it stirs something familiar, like hearing a lullaby you'd forgotten you knew. Neuroscientific studies now support the idea that metaphor, myth, and symbol activate deeper parts of the brain than literal language. The limbic system, responsible for emotion and memory, lights up in response to symbolic imagery, allowing new information to bypass cognitive resistance and speak directly to our intuition. This is precisely why the Hermetic teachings were encoded. They were never meant merely to inform the mind, but to awaken the soul. Let us consider this practically. Many people today read spiritual texts or listen to lectures and feel momentarily inspired, only to find themselves unchanged. Why? Because information alone does not transform. Wisdom is not in the knowing, but in the doing. The KYBALION makes this clear. Knowledge, unless applied, is useless. Think of a seed in your hand. It holds the potential for a tree, a forest even, but unless you plant it, nourish it, and protect it, it remains just that potential. The same is true of philosophical principles. You must work them into the soil of your daily life. For example, the principle of mentalism we discussed earlier invites us to notice our thoughts as creative forces. But unless we practice directing those thoughts with intention, the principle remains dormant, a seed never sown. So how do we begin decoding the symbolic language of Hermeticism in a way that is both meaningful and practical? Begin by observing your environment through the lens of correspondence. Look at your outer life as a mirror of your inner state. If your days feel chaotic, what does your inner world look like? If your relationships are filled with tension, where in your own mind are you resisting peace? This is not blame, it is power. When we reclaim the ability to see outer conditions as reflections, we gain the power to change them. This mirrors a principle in cognitive behavioral therapy, where the core belief is that our interpretation of events, not the events themselves, determine our emotional reality. In both psychology and Hermeticism, the message is the same: perception shapes experience. Here's a simple action you can take today. Choose one recurring pattern in your life, a repeated conflict, a health issue, or even a persistent mood. Write it down. Then ask, what belief or thought might be generating this pattern? This is your symbolic key. Don't rush to fix it. Sit with it, reflect, and then, using the principle of polarity, begin shifting your focus toward the opposite vibration. If the pattern is fear, consciously invite courage. If it is confusion, seek clarity through quiet reflection. Over time, as you practice this alchemical approach, you'll begin to notice subtle changes. Your thoughts will soften, your reactions will slow, and your outer life will start reflecting new patterns. What was once encoded and hidden is now emerging into the light, not through ancient scrolls, but through your willingness to live as both a scientist of the mind and a philosopher of the heart. You do not need to read ancient Greek or understand quantum mechanics to apply this. You need only the willingness to pay attention, to live symbolically, and to practice what you already know. In the quiet moments of your life, between the errands and the headlines, the principles of Hermetic wisdom are still whispering. They are not far away, not locked in some dusty temple, but pulsing within you, only waiting for you to remember. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine dropping a pebble into a still pond. Watch how the ripples move outward in perfect circles, touching everything in their path. This is how the mind works. Every thought we have, every feeling we allow to take root, sends ripples through our nervous system, our relationships, our decisions, and eventually into the physical world we live in. This is not just poetic metaphor. It is grounded in both ancient philosophy and modern science. The Hermetic principles teach us that everything in the universe is vibration. Nothing rests. From the densest matter to the subtlest emotion, all is in motion, resonating at different frequencies. And science agrees. In fact, quantum field theory confirms that what we perceive as solid matter is, in truth, made up of vibrating fields of energy. Even the atoms that form your body are 99.9999999% empty space, with particles dancing in constant motion. The chair you sit on, the breath you take, the thoughts you hold, all are patterns of vibration. Now, why does this matter? Because once we accept that vibration is the fundamental nature of all things, we gain a new kind of responsibility. If everything vibrates, then we are not static beings reacting to a static world. We are dynamic participants in an ongoing symphony of frequencies. The principle of vibration teaches us that by altering our inner state, we alter the frequency we emit, and thereby change the way we interact with the world. This isn't just theory. It's been demonstrated in laboratory settings. Studies in neurobiology have shown that emotional states like gratitude, compassion, and love produce coherent heart rhythms, which in turn affect brain function, immune response, and even the electromagnetic fields surrounding the body. The HeartMath Institute, for example, has spent decades measuring how emotional states influence physical health and how people in a coherent state can influence the emotional state of others, simply by presence. In other words, you are a transmitter. Let's bring this home. Think of your emotions as music. When you are anxious, your frequency is dissonant, sharp like a violin string stretched too tight. When you are calm or joyful, your frequency becomes harmonious, like a well-tuned cello. People around you can feel this even if they don't consciously understand it. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt tension, without anyone speaking? That's vibration. Have you ever sat quietly beside someone and felt a sense of peace settle over you? That too is vibration. And here's where the ancient wisdom becomes a practical tool. We can choose what we broadcast. We can learn to tune ourselves like instruments. To begin, I recommend a daily practice as simple as it is powerful. Each morning, take 5 minutes to sit in silence and consciously breathe. As you inhale, imagine drawing in light, warmth, or calm. As you exhale, release tension or fear. This isn't just visualization, it is entrainment. You are literally guiding your brain and body into coherence. Over time, this changes your baseline frequency. In addition, you might try speaking out loud a simple affirmation like, I am calm, I am steady, I am aligned with peace. Spoken word carries vibratory power. Neuroscientists have shown that vocalizing positive affirmations activates reward centers in the brain and reinforces neural pathways that support emotional regulation and self-esteem. This isn't about pretending to be happy when you're not. It's about practicing the vibration of the reality you want to live in. And for those of you who may think it's too late to change, consider this. Your brain remains plastic throughout your entire life. That means it continues to rewire and form new connections until your final day. A study from the University of California, Berkeley, found that even adults in their 80s can grow new neural pathways through repeated mental and emotional practice. The idea that we become fixed or unchangeable with age is not only false, it's dangerous. It robs us of our most basic power, the power to grow. So ask yourself now, what kind of energy do I want to carry into the world today? What frequency do I want to live at? Do I want to be a source of peace, of clarity, of wisdom, or do I want to keep resonating with fear, noise, and reaction? You have a choice every moment to shift your vibration. And with that shift, everything else begins to move. Like that pebble in the pond, your calm changes the water. Your clarity brings light to confusion. Your love, yes, even now, even here, creates harmony where there was once discord. This is not mysticism. This is mastery. And it begins with the vibration of a single thought. Picture standing on a bridge between two worlds, one lit by clarity and purpose, the other shadowed by confusion and fear. The Hermetic principle of polarity teaches us that these opposites are not enemies but expressions of the same force, merely vibrating at different points on the same scale. Day and night, hot and cold, joy and sorrow, strength and weakness, these are not separate entities but polarities. And just as a pendulum swings between extremes, so too does our inner world. The genius of this principle lies in its practical power. We are not helpless before our moods, our fears, our habits. Through awareness and intention, we can shift our mental state along this scale, moving from fear to courage, from doubt to faith, from grief to peace. And this is not just ancient wisdom cloaked in metaphor. It is echoed in the science of neuroplasticity and emotional regulation. Studies from institutions like Harvard and Stanford have demonstrated that by deliberately focusing attention on a positive state, we activate and strengthen the neural networks associated with that state. This is not wishful thinking, it is measurable, trainable transformation. Let me offer an image. Imagine your emotions as a radio dial. If you are tuned into a station playing fear, you can't hear the music of love unless you change the frequency. The key, then, is not to fight the fear or suppress the grief, but to shift your attention and energy to the opposite pole. If fear is loud, lean toward courage, not by pretending fear doesn't exist, but by feeding the flame of bravery through action, word, or even breath. If you feel overwhelmed by sadness, focus not on erasing it, but on cultivating gratitude, however small. Just as darkness cannot survive where there is light, low vibrations dissolve when we consistently direct our energy toward the higher pole. This is what Hermeticism calls mental transmutation, the conscious act of transforming one mental state into another. To bring this into practice, consider a moment when you feel anxious or angry. Pause. Take 3 deep breaths and ask yourself, what is the opposite of what I'm feeling? Then name it. Calm, joy, trust, and speak it out loud. This act alone begins to shift the brain's chemistry. Research from UCLA has shown that labeling an emotion decreases activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear, and increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, where reasoning and self-regulation occur. Now, pair the spoken word with a simple gesture. Place your hand on your chest, close your eyes, and visualize yourself embodying the positive pole. This small act, repeated regularly, builds the habit of transmutation. It may seem simple, even too simple, but the most profound changes in nature happen quietly, like the slow unfurling of a flower toward the sun. And here is a deeper truth. You are not your moods. You are not your pain. You are not even your thoughts. You are the one who sees them, the observer behind the experience. And that observer has choice. This is where the power of polarity becomes liberating. We are not trapped in cycles of suffering, though it may often feel that way. We have the ability to shift, not by erasing the past or controlling every circumstance, but by learning to turn the dial of awareness and vibration. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space is the bridge between poles, and you hold the key to cross it. So today, make it a practice. When you feel yourself pulled into negativity, pause and breathe. When you feel disconnected, recall something you love. When fear rises, reach for courage by taking a small but bold step. Call someone you trust. Speak a truth you've hidden. Take a walk in the sun. These are not grand gestures. They are subtle movements of the pendulum toward light. And the more you practice, the more you'll find that the swing toward the negative becomes weaker, shorter, less commanding. Eventually, you'll find yourself dwelling more and more at the higher pole, not because the lower no longer exists, but because you have learned to live above it. Remember, this is not about perfection. It is about direction. Which way are you facing? Which pole are you nurturing? With each choice, each breath, each word, you are shaping your inner climate and, by extension, the outer weather of your life. And in doing so, you do more than heal yourself. You become a center of quiet influence, a steady presence in a world too often swinging wildly between extremes. That is the quiet revolution of polarity. That is the alchemy of the soul. Imagine life as a great ocean tide, rising and falling in an endless rhythm that touches all things. The Hermetic principle of rhythm reminds us that everything moves in cycles. Night follows day. Winter gives way to spring. Joy often returns after sorrow, and even the strongest storm eventually finds stillness. These patterns are not random. They are part of a deeper order, an invisible pulse that governs nature, time, and even our emotions. Just as the moon pulls the sea, so too do unseen forces move within us. Our minds and hearts rise and fall in accordance with universal rhythm. But here lies the vital difference between one who is unaware and one who lives with mastery. The master learns to ride the wave rather than be swallowed by it. Science offers evidence for this in the field of chronobiology, which studies biological rhythms like circadian cycles. Our body temperature, hormone levels, blood pressure, and even our mood follow regular cycles every 24 hours. When we ignore these natural rhythms through stress, artificial light, lack of sleep, we experience disorder and disease. But when we align with them, we thrive. Similarly, emotional rhythms follow their own patterns. Feelings surge and retreat, often in reaction to life events, but also due to internal shifts, many of which are inherited from early life or collective memory. Now let's bring this into lived experience. Think of moments when life felt heavy, perhaps for no clear reason. Days when you woke up weary, disconnected, or anxious, even when things appeared to be fine on the outside. The mistake most people make is assuming something is wrong, that the low is a sign of failure or weakness. But rhythm teaches us something else, that the downward swing is not punishment, but preparation. Just as a bow must be drawn back before launching an arrow forward, life sometimes contracts before it expands. This view shifts our relationship to challenge. Instead of resisting the low moments, we begin to ask, what is this phase preparing me for? What insight is hidden in this stillness? Neuroscience supports this shift in perspective. A study from the University of Wisconsin found that individuals who practiced mindfulness during emotional lows showed increased activity in the prefrontal cortex and reduced activation in the amygdala, which is associated with fear. In other words, awareness transforms suffering into resilience. But awareness alone is not enough. The Hermetic texts offer a powerful tool, the art of neutralization. They teach that while we cannot stop the pendulum of life from swinging, we can choose where we stand in relation to it. Imagine standing at the midpoint of a swinging pendulum. The ends move wildly, but the center remains still. When we root ourselves in higher consciousness, the ups and downs of life no longer drag us into chaos. This is not denial or detachment. It is a deep, quiet strength, and it is built through daily practice. Begin with breath. When emotion surges, instead of reacting immediately, take 3 long, conscious breaths. Feel your feet on the ground. Remind yourself this too is a wave. It will rise, it will fall, and I will remain centered. Over time, this becomes a habit, and the nervous system begins to rewire itself. In fact, Harvard research shows that regular mindfulness practice leads to measurable changes in the structure of the brain, particularly in the areas related to emotional regulation and self-awareness. There is one more layer to this principle that often goes unnoticed. Rhythm is not just about balance. It is about timing. Just as a skilled dancer moves with the beat rather than against it, wisdom involves learning the right moment to act, to speak, to rest, to begin again. This is what the ancient Greeks called kairos, sacred time, the right time, and it comes not through force, but through listening. Listening to the rhythm of your own body. Listening to the cycles of nature. listening to the quiet voice of intuition that often speaks when all else has gone still. So I encourage you today not just to think about rhythm, but to observe it. Watch how your energy rises in the morning and softens in the evening. Notice the cycles of inspiration and fatigue, of connection and solitude. Do not rush to fix what is low. Instead, breathe through it, rest within it, and trust that the rhythm will carry you forward again. This is the great invitation of Hermetic wisdom, echoed now in science, in psychology, and in the deep knowing of lived experience, to live not as a victim of change, but as a participant in a greater harmony. You are not a leaf blown by the wind. You are a musician within a vast symphony. Your breath, your choices, your presence, they matter. They shape not only your life but the subtle frequencies around you. With each conscious breath, you return to the center. And from that still point, you begin again.